This is America, and this is the House of Representatives. I'll be back later to explain why the president is pushing the states to change their congressional maps and how doing so could affect the complexion of democracy. First, here's Cyril Venier in our Washington studio.
Roz, thank you very much. Like most U.S. presidents before him, Donald Trump has a midterms problem. If history is anything to go by, his party will lose seats in Congress in the November elections, maybe even their majority in the House. The last time that happened to President Trump, he got impeached twice. So he is highly incentivized to help his party win. And he has found a way: aggressive redistricting. The idea is to redraw electoral maps of just enough states in just the right way, so you might just keep control of Congress. Rosalind Jordan explains.
When your party controls one or both houses of Congress, it's easy to be a successful president. But if your party loses power, your agenda and possibly your political survival are at risk.
You got to win the midterms, because if we don't win the midterms, it's just going to be, they'll find a reason to impeach me. I'll get impeached.
Republicans control the House of Representatives by just 5 votes. That's too close for comfort for U.S. President Donald Trump. He decided that midterm redistricting could increase Republicans' power as well as his own. Trump launched the current redistricting wave in June 2025. He called on Texas, the second largest state, to redraw its map to send more Republicans to the House. Then the biggest state, California, approved a measure of its own, with the goal of electing more Democrats and canceling the Texas Republicans' votes. 8 other states have joined the redistricting battle, including right here in Virginia. Voters recently approved a new map that could send 4 more Democrats to Washington. But the state's high court could invalidate the map for technical reasons. Meantime, Louisiana is about to vote on a map that could send 1 more Republican to Congress after a recent Supreme Court ruling called its current map unconstitutional. The Supreme Court said Louisiana used race illegally as a reason to justify minority representation in Congress. Civil rights groups are afraid that Republicans will use that ruling to wipe out dozens of congressional seats long held by Black, Latino, and Asian politicians. And then there are the hundreds of so-called safe seats, districts created to protect both Republican and Democratic incumbents.
In April, Uncle Sam takes a census as required by the Constitution to determine state representation in Congress.
They used to be created every 10 years after the census, but these seats may soon be changing boundaries much more often. If the party's tit-for-tat power play continues into 2028, it will raise growing concerns that just 5% of House seats could be competitive, a sure recipe for creating a class of unaccountable politicians. Rosalind Jordan, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Al Jazeera's Manuel Rapalo walks us through how redistricting works in practice. In other words, how you can redraw your way to power.
They might just look like lines on a map, but shift them a little to the left or a little to the right, and it's enough to completely change the political direction of a city, a state, even an entire nation. Put simply, redistricting is the act of redrawing boundaries, specifically the maps making up America's congressional and state legislative districts. The idea is that as populations change, the maps change too, aiming to give a fair snapshot of any particular community. But when the time comes around for those maps to update, generally every 10 years, some use it as an opportunity to take advantage of the process and favor certain parties or candidates. That's called gerrymandering. Take the fictional town of, say, Mannyville. Voters there share similar views, similar values, and it's almost a given that they'd pick me, Manny, to represent them. It could be in my opponent's best interest, then, that the boundaries of the district where Mannyville sits be redrawn, reducing my chance of a victory by putting those reliably Manny voters into different districts entirely. That splitting of the vote is called cracking. It can also work the other way, too, where those in charge of redrawing the maps cram as many opposition voters, in this case, people who support me, Manny, into a single district. We will likely win that one district by a landslide, but it'll be far outweighed by results from everywhere else. I get one district, my opponent secures the rest. They win a majority. Ultimately, it means those in charge of redrawing the maps have a lot of power, and even that changes state by state. Some are done by the state legislature, others by commissions. It's a lot to think about next time you're crossing from one neighborhood to the next.
Introducing our panel now, Corey Crowley, a Republican strategist and a former congressional staffer, and Jeremy Mayer, a professor in the Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University. Gentlemen, thank you very much to both of you for being with us. Corey, Donald Trump started this round of redistricting to help the Republican Party. You're a Republican. Are you comfortable with all of this?
No, because the shoe always ends up on the other foot, and you're starting to see that already in the states that are retaliating. And so you can always start these battles. It's easy to be the one who starts them, but it's very challenging once you're in the middle of it. And now it's an all-out war between Republicans and Democrats to see who can gerrymander the most districts prior to the midterm elections. And it's going to go all the way into the 2028 races and probably well beyond that into 2030. This isn't a process that's easy to stop now that the elephant's out and running wild.
Jeremy Mayer, is it going to work in the sense of avoiding a defeat, especially in the House of Representatives, for Republicans in November?
I don't think so, because the tides are running so badly against Trump right now that it doesn't matter how he districts. But it's the best move he has left in his quiver to have a chance, because this might keep it closer than it otherwise would be.
All right, let me bring in the numbers then. So here's the current makeup of the House. And remember, there's an election in 6 months. Right now, Republicans hold a slim majority with 217 seats. The Democrats have 212. 1 seat is held by an independent who usually sides with the Republicans. 5 are currently vacant because the politicians who held them either resigned or died. The bottom line of those numbers is that Republicans have a very small minority, a 5-seat majority, 5-seat majority in the House of Representatives right now. Now watch how many seats each party could possibly gain in the states that are redistricting. So the changes to the maps in Texas, that's where it started, will likely see a net gain to the Republicans of 3 to 5 seats. But California hit back immediately, redrew its own congressional map, and that will create 5 extra seats for Democrats. So California offsets Texas, electorally speaking. But Republicans also stand to gain seats in all of these states, Missouri, Tennessee, Ohio, North Carolina, Louisiana, Alabama, and Florida, while Democrats are expected to gain seats in Utah and Virginia. If things play out like this map suggests in November's midterms, then Democrats could gain a total of 10 seats. Republicans could gain 17. That's a net win of plus 7 seats for the Republican Party. And that would mean that Republicans would or could keep control of the House in November. Corey, do you think this will work?
No, and the reason is this, because there's always an unintended consequence to everything that happens in politics, and this is no different. And the tide that Jeremy was talking about with the midterms is trending against the president, and it typically trends against the party in power. But this time it's trending even stronger, probably to the margins of 2006, something we haven't seen in 20 years. And so you can have this type of redistricting and create some safe seats some places. What you can't control is the voters who are moderates who decide other seats around the country, who are then turned off by all of these partisan gains and are still going to side against the president. And I say that as a Republican. I don't want to lose these seats, but you've got to be wide-eyed about what's going to happen in the election. And I don't see a way for Republicans to control the House, even if they could gerrymander 30 more seats into their favor, because they're going to lose competitive districts across the country.
Because the whole point of redistricting is you can you can distance yourself from the political reality of the country. Both of you have been saying that politically, Republicans are not doing well right now. And it may be with the Iran war and other reasons, the economy as well, that things will continue to go in favor of Democrats and against Republicans between now and the midterms. But the whole point of this redistricting is you can kind of divorce yourself from that political reality. You both agree that it's not going to be enough. You can get a couple extra seats, but ultimately you can't stem the tide. That's what you're telling us.
Yes, and also, as Corey says, redistricting has some consequences you can't predict. So Texas is a good example. They drew these new lines on the assumption that Hispanics were moving towards Trump in the same way that they moved in 2024. There was a real amazing shift in some border Hispanic communities in Texas for Trump in 2024. That is all reversed by the polling come out of Texas because Hispanics don't like what ICE is doing. And so Trump is going to maybe, and the Republican Party maybe, is going to lose some of these new districts that are built on fantasies about 2024.
By the way, so Donald Trump pushed Texas to start the redistricting about a year ago. And then, as we said, California hit back. This is what the president said when California redrew its own map, offsetting the Texas gains.
Well, I think I'm going to be filing a lawsuit pretty soon, and I think we're going to be very successful in it. We're going to be filing it through the Department of Justice. That's going to happen.
So the president started something. He touched off this redistricting race, and then when someone else does it, he feels it's not fair. Isn't that a pretty big giveaway that maybe you shouldn't be doing this in the first place?
Yes. And for so long, the United States had started to trend state by state towards fewer partisan districts to fairer redistricting after censuses. And now this has put us back probably 2 generations in terms of the progress there. And we live in a system where every state gets to do what they want. And so if the president wants, or Republicans want, Democrat states to redistrict in an either fairer or more Republican way, the only way to do that is to elect more Republican governors and more state legislators. At some point, this fight has to go to the grassroots if you're really going to win it. You can only do so much from Washington.
How do voters feel about redistricting itself? Because then it's actually become an issue in the campaign to some extent. I'm not saying it's as big as the economy or immigration or the Iran war, but it is something that's making headlines, making news in this country. How do voters feel about the effort?
Well, voters might have an opinion about it, but it's never one of their top 5 or top 10 issues. It reminds me of campaign finance. When you ask voters, do you like our campaign finance system? They say no, but they're not willing to change how they vote on the basis of it. The solution for redistricting or for gerrymandering is actually Congress. Congress has the power in Article 1 to set terms for how congressional elections will take place. The Democrats have had a bill that would force all states to use nonpartisan districting. It just can't get through the House or Senate.
So there's a way to do it, which was going to be one of my questions. How do you do this in a way, because redistricting sounds, I think, to the layperson as like a very bureaucratic, should be a pretty boring process, right? That's not political. There is a way, there's a law, or rather there's a bill that could make this into law potentially if the president were to sign this, if it were to pass Congress, but it doesn't.
Right, and I don't think it's going to take 2 generations. I think a lot of time in American politics, things have to get a lot worse before we quickly find a solution. So if we get a lot of gerrymandering, which I agree we will over the next few cycles, I think it might rise to the point where the voters say, wait a minute, this isn't the voters picking their representatives, this is the representatives picking their voters, and it's wrong, and it needs to stop.
So we looked at the origins of redistricting, and it's almost as old as the country itself. John Hendren looks at how the battle over district lines became deeply woven into the story of American democracy.
Politicians in America have been gaming the political map since nearly the start of the Republic. In 1812, Massachusetts Governor Elbridge Gerry approved a redistricting plan that included a sprawling district designed to maximize the number of voters for his Democratic-Republican Party and minimize those for the rival Federalist Party. People said it looked like a salamander, so they combined Gerry's name with the shape of the district and came up with a uniquely American portmanteau that's been used to describe districts favoring one party ever since: gerrymander.
The lesson was clear. Whoever controls the political map controls who is in power. In the mid-20th century, southern states used gerrymandering to minimize the number of black voters in districts and added poll taxes and literacy tests to disqualify black Americans from voting. During the civil rights upheaval of the 1960s, Congress changed that. President Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965, eliminating some of the lingering vestiges of slavery.
And today, we strike away the last major shackle of those fierce and ancient bonds.
The act bars states from creating districts that dilute the voting power of racial minorities. That led many states to create majority-minority districts, with black voters making up more than half the total, choosing candidates often from their own neighborhoods. The Supreme Court has recently altered the national map, ruling in 2019 that gerrymandering cannot be challenged in federal court, and in April ruling that majority-minority districts can only be created if there is significant evidence of discrimination.
A blog called The Fulcrum has put together a list of the most gerrymandered congressional districts in America. Among the worst offenders, Illinois' 13th district, snaking across urban areas to give Democrats an edge. And Nashville, Tennessee, a Democratic city in a Republican state. The Republican legislature carved the city into 3 parts, including parts of the surrounding Republican suburbs, to deny Democrats any seat at all. The recent Supreme Court decisions are only likely to exacerbate a race to create more partisan districts. John Hendren, Al Jazeera, Los Angeles.
So this is something we haven't touched on yet, but it's so important. There is well, you're going to tell me whether you think there's a racial component to this, because the way that Republican states specifically have redistricted, it's always going the same way, which they remove majority minority districts, which are voting districts where minority voters, typically African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, etc., have a majority. So another way of saying that is that they are diminishing the political representation of minorities. Is this racially motivated, or is there a racial element to this in your view?
Well, you could also argue the reverse, that these districts were created by gerrymandering to give those minorities greater voices over the course of decades, and that now this is being undone and creating a fairer, more geographic approach to it. So there's 2 sides to the coin, and there's 2 sides to this whole gerrymandering vote or discussion anyway, which is that, do you want people represented based upon their similarities, whether they be racial or ethnic or their income levels, or do you want them by geography? And I think it's often thought that it's most fair by geography, but you have a lot of districts where the poor are concentrated in one area, the rich are concentrated in another. So there's not a fair way to really do this. What we need to do is try to take the people and the politics out of it as much as possible. And that, I think, is what's been reintroduced that's really causing the American public to have a problem with it.
Yeah, Jerome, Mayor, your opinion on this?
So what we're going to see as a result of the Supreme Court ruling is the number of blacks.
That's last month, by the way. This is new, right?
Right. The Supreme Court ruling last month is going to lead to a biblical exodus of black representation in this town. Right now, blacks are represented roughly in equality with their percent of the population in Congress, which has never happened in American history. It's been true for about 10 years. That's all over. There are going to be a number of black incumbents who go home.
Can you say that again?
So today, blacks are about 13% of the population and about 13% of Congress. That's never happened before in American history.
That sounds like a reasonable thing.
Well, except for where they're concentrated, 13% of the overall population, but they're not spread 13% fairly across congressional districts that make up 13%. So it's, numbers number in a lot of different ways, and that makes it tough. But I don't disagree that it's better when people are represented and see people like themselves representing them. That makes young kids grow up and believe in the American dream. It has a lot of positive effects on society, but
it shouldn't be a dream. It shouldn't be an American dream. It should be American normality.
I agree with you, but the point is, where African Americans live, where Hispanics live, are extremely concentrated in the United States. And so to get their representation up, and I'm glad we have, we had the same issue with women, don't forget. There were almost no women in Congress, and then we started to see that uptick. And in 2016, I believe, although you're a better professor of this than me, we reached our peak of women in Congress.
Well, but there is a crucial difference. Women are over 50% of the population.
And they're evenly spread out across the country.
And they're less than 20% of Congress.
Yeah.
So we are failing to represent them equally because they can't be districted. Whereas at least in the case of African Americans and to a lesser extent Hispanics, they have achieved some level of political power. And I don't think that's unrelated to Obama's victory. Because even though Obama never served in the House of Representatives, the presence of black leadership created a pattern, a tradition that Obama could tap into.
And it created forces of personality that also helped him on the campaign trail and along the way.
But Jeremy, continue your description. You were saying that for the last decade or so, the House of Representatives had, just as a matter of fact, on a factual basis, achieved what seemed like a pretty close proportionate representation of minorities in the House, correct?
Yes, that's true.
And you were about to say, I think
there's going to be a terrible exodus. Like the Republicans are going to go after the incumbents because they can. and they're going to district them to death, and they are not going to be in Congress come 2030. It may even happen faster. There's a couple southern states that are looking to redistrict for this election 6 months from now, and to change the lines that people have been counting on. And it's unbelievable, but Alabama's going to try to do it, Mississippi, a couple other states.
So to both of you, is that good or bad for democracy?
Well, it's certainly bad if you do it before an election and this close. I mean, you've got representatives who've campaigned, they've raised the money, they've been out soliciting the votes, and then to just shift their district immediately this close to an election is not fair to the voters either, who are trying to do what voters are tasked with doing, which is get to know the people running, figure out who you like, figure out who you agree with, and vote for the best one. If you suddenly say tomorrow, hey, forget all those guys, you got a whole new set of men and women to vet, that's tough.
But that's the president's doing, right? All this redistricting in the last 12 months has been happening under pressure from the president.
He certainly started it. I mean, now it's happening under pressure of Gavin Newsom and a bunch of others as well. So you've got a whole movement out there, including former President Barack Obama, who campaigned in Virginia, where they just did this by referendum. He was there campaigning, saying, let's do tit for tat here. They did it in Texas. We got to make up for it.
Although there is a big difference between what Republicans did and what Democrats did. When Democrats did what they did in Virginia, it's temporary. It's going to stop. Whereas what Republicans are doing, it's forever. It's going to be this way until we decide to change it.
Jeremy Mayer, the redistricting is also going to create a great number over time of safe seats. So seats that really aren't contested because the map has been drawn in such a way that we know it's going to go one way or we know it's going to go the other way. There isn't real much political work to do to get the voters' support. You already have it.
It's even worse than that because they aren't safe seats for a primary election. Yeah. It creates someone who knows, I'm a Democrat Democrat's definitely going to win. Yeah. The only thing I should be afraid of is someone to my left who's going to say he's not a real Democrat because he shook Donald Trump's hand or did something that was perceived as somewhat rebellious to the Democratic mainstream or the left.
So what's the effect of that for the country?
Well, that creates more and more extremes in the House of Representatives, and it's been happening over the last 40 years. It used to be that Congress was filled with people in the middle. That's where the action was. That's where the power was because there was overlap. Now, the most conservative Democrat is to the left of the most liberal Republican, and that means there's nobody in the middle.
You've both said you don't really like this system. You don't like the fact that it's currently being turbocharged because it can be unfair. It can be unfair both ways. Sure. How do you reverse this? How do you change this?
Well, there had been movements happening across states to have it be nonpartisan. In fact, Virginia, before they just did what they did by referendum, had a nonpartisan commission that was appointed, and they did it. It wasn't politicians down in Richmond. And we've got, in a state like Iowa, where I'm from, we do it completely by computers. A computer has 3 basic factors it works with. Make sure the population deviation is as close as possible, can't split a county in half, and make sure that the district is as contiguous as possible. It kicks out a map, and that's the map. Those would be the better ways to do it, because then you end up with competitive seats. And he's right that the real bad effect on this for the long term is you cannot have bipartisanship in Congress when you have districts where your only threat is from your left or right flank.
You know, I have asked you, by the way, what the effect, because we focused on the midterms for 2026, but some states are expected to continue to redistrict beyond this election cycle. So what's the long-term effect, 2028 presidential election and moving ahead forward from that?
Well, we could see a situation where states are redistricting every 2 years. Every 4 years, which would be terrible. It's also terribly expensive, as Corey and I were talking about in the green room, but it's also just bad for democracy because the value of a House seat goes down. One of the reasons you win a House seat is because this district likes you. And if the lines are changing every 2 or 4 years, your ability to stay in office declines and the value of victory goes down.
But how often can they be doing this?
Well, they could theoretically under the system that's now happening. It could happen every 2 years. They could wake up and say, let's say a legislature shifts in, pick a state, Virginia goes back and forth in control regularly, and the governor has a one-term limit. So you could be in a situation where Republicans are in control 4 years from now of every lever of power in Virginia, and they say, we're doing it again. And then you have a situation where members of Congress, to Jeremy's point, are representing a district which isn't even the one that they're running to represent in the next election. So how do you balance the concerns of one geographic set of your voters over here when you're vying for the votes of a set of voters over here?
One quick one on the impact to Donald Trump's presidency, depending on the results of the midterms. I mean, if Republicans, as you both seem to be predicting, if Republicans lose control of the House, how deep is the cut for Donald Trump?
He's going to get impeached again. And
you agree with him?
Absolutely, because the Democrats have to do it because of this very pressure. Oh, the primary pressure on the Democrats. The Democratic base truly believes that Donald Trump is a demon who is about to destroy this republic, that he is the dictator long feared. And so how can you as a Democrat sit in the House with a majority and not impeach him? You believe that he's guilty of manifest crimes. Just today, front page of the Washington Post, we learned that the intel community has been telling Trump that Iran has many missiles and is not going to concede for 90 days, if not more. And that means the president's been lying to the people worse than LBJ lied during Vietnam. And so if you're a Democrat, you'd be like, why wouldn't you impeach this guy?
So you think he gets impeached if Republicans lose the House? Real quick, I have 15 seconds left. Yeah. Do you also think Donald Trump gets impeached if Republicans lose the House?
I do. Not removed from office because the Senate's still going to have Republican strength. But I do think he'll get impeached again. And I actually think Democrats have to do it, but it will be one of the worst mistakes they can make. You cannot impeach the guy a third time. It's a waste of time.
Although he richly deserves it on a legal basis alone.
I got to run. Corey, Crowley, Jeremy Mayer, thank you so much to both of you for joining us today. And that's all from the team here in Washington. For now, it's back to Rosalind Jordan and then to Al Jazeera's global headquarters in Doha. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Cyril. On the next episode of This is America, making America healthy again. As healthcare costs rise, is the president keeping his promises? And how will this affect Republicans in the upcoming midterm elections? That's Friday, 18:30 GMT, 2:30 p.m. Eastern here in the U.S. Bye for now.